Welcome back to our channel, where small things tell big stories. Today, we're diving into a tale so quiet, so easily overlooked, that it almost slipped through history unnoticed. In the early months of 1985, the U.S. Mint was operating with practiced precision. The Jefferson nickel, unchanged in basic design since 1938, rolled off production lines in staggering quantities. Tens of millions were minted that year, each bearing the familiar profile of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse. For most, these nickels were little more than pocket change, destined to vanish into vending machines or jingle forgotten in dresser drawers. Yet, amid the mass of ordinary, one coin carried a secret. The Denver Mint, responsible for a significant portion of the year's output, followed a tightly regulated system. Each die was meticulously crafted, inspected, and installed. But even the most controlled environments are not immune to anomaly. A subtle mistake slipped through unnoticed, a flaw so minor it evaded detection by the Mint's own scrutiny, yet so peculiar it would eventually rewrite the story of an otherwise mundane coin. The error would remain buried for years, living anonymously in circulation. It passed from hand to hand, through diners, gas stations, coat pockets. Nobody looked closely. Why would they? A nickel is a nickel. Until one day, in the dim light of a cluttered basement, a collector named Daniel Hargrove spotted something that didn't belong. That he wasn't looking for anything specific. He was sorting coins from an old inherited jar, the kind people toss change into for decades and never count. He had already spent hours hunched over a desk, eyes strained, separating wheat pennies and silver dimes. Then, it caught his eye: Jefferson's steps. Or rather, the troubling lack of them. Daniel leaned closer. The reverse of the coin should show crisp, parallel lines on Monticello's front, 6 columns of sharply defined steps. On this nickel, they were nearly absent. The detail was blurred, mushy, as if time had worn them down. But the coin was otherwise uncirculated. The fields were clean, the rim intact. No wear. Just, missing detail. He checked the mint mark, D. Denver. And the date, 1985. He thumbed through reference books, checked online forums, and called a friend who specialized in Jefferson nickels. Their verdict? It wasn't wear. It was a minting flaw. A die deterioration or possibly an over-polished die, but something was off about it. Still, these things weren't unheard of. Then came the twist that it wasn't just the steps. Upon closer inspection, the coin bore a doubling effect, faint, but there. On Jefferson's eye. His lips. A ghost image. Daniel's pulse quickened. Die deterioration was one thing, but doubling? That was another level entirely. A mechanical doubling, maybe, or could it be hub doubling? The distinction mattered, a lot. He mailed the coin to a grading service, hoping, dreading, obsessing. Weeks passed. When the coin came back, it carried a label: 1985, D. Jefferson nickel, double die obverse with overpolished reverse die, missing steps. That was unheard of. Not only a double die, but also the kind of reverse flaw that rendered Monticello's steps ghostly smooth. The two errors together in one coin? Incredibly rare. Perhaps unique. At first, no one believed it. The 1985 D wasn't known for major errors. The year had always been quiet in the Jefferson series, few standout varieties, low collector interest. But this coin began to stir whispers. Daniel posted photos online. Debates erupted. Was it legitimate? Could this combination really have occurred on a single strike? Auction houses were skeptical at first. Error coins did surface now and then, but this? A dual error? That was something different. Then came the first tentative offer: $500. For a nickel. It was laughable and staggering at the same time. The next offer hit $1,000. Still, Daniel held it back. Not yet. He wanted answers more than money. How many could there be? Did anyone else have one? Weeks turned to months. Other collectors scoured their hoards. Some found partial matches, nickels with the missing steps, yes. Others with slight doubling. But no coin matched Daniel's precisely. It seemed to be a one-off. A freak accident, the result of two rare minting errors converging on a single coin. By the second year, the coin's reputation had grown. It was spoken about in forums with reverence, suspicion, envy. A leading numismatic journal published an article titled, "The Phantom Nickel of '85." It dissected the errors, consulted experts, traced die lineage, even proposed theories involving replacement dies and late-stage press maintenance. Then came the unexpected turn. A retired mint worker, after reading the article, stepped forward anonymously. He remembered the coin, sort of. In 1985, he said, a set of dies had been rapidly polished following a late-night production jam. There was pressure to get machines running again, quotas to meet. He recalled the maintenance crew hurrying the process, cutting corners. One die had shown signs of early deterioration but wasn't replaced immediately. The timeline matched that it wasn't proof, but it was enough to lend the story weight. Enough to stoke the fire. At a private auction in 2023, the coin sold, final bid $17,200. Daniel watched the bidding war unfold with disbelief. He remembered the jar. The dust. The hum of the old basement lamp. That nickel had once bought him a pack of gum, now it was a legend. What made it so valuable wasn't just the dual errors, it was the confluence, the impossibility, the mystery. The sheer improbability of both flaws aligning on one strike. It defied statistics. It defied expectation. Other coins tried to follow in its wake. Sellers listed 1985 D nickels with smoothed steps or questionable doubling, hoping to ride the trend. But none matched the original. The market corrected. Only Daniel's coin, dubbed the Ghost of Monticello, held its status, and even now, decades after its creation, the story isn't over. Some believe there could be another out there. Maybe two. A forgotten twin in a bank roll, a collector's drawer, a kid's lunch money. Maybe it's already been spent. Maybe you've held it, you wouldn't know, unless you looked. It was 1988, a year brimming with quiet transitions. The Cold War was waning, and American industry was shifting gears from the muscular legacy of steel and smoke to the softer currents of information. At the Denver Mint, the rhythmic hum of coin presses reverberated against steel walls, spitting out hundreds of thousands of 5-cent coins, Jefferson nickels, each bearing the stately profile of Thomas Jefferson, unflinching as ever. To any casual eye, these coins looked no different from their brothers of years prior. The metal composition remained unchanged, 75% copper, 25% nickel. The design had been consistent since 1938, and while minor tweaks and adjustments occurred through the years, nothing seemed remarkable about 1988. But something did happen. Something subtle, something the machines didn't flag, the eye didn't catch. And for years, no one noticed. For Jim Wallace, a Midwestern collector whose fascination with coins had started with a grandfather's dusty cigar box, the 1988 nickel was, for the longest time, just another date in a long line of common strikes. He had been collecting for decades, a man patient with minute details. Most of his peers pursued silver, errors with dramatic flair, off-center strikes, double dies visible without a loop. But Jim had developed an affection for nuance. It was during one late night, hunched over a glass desk illuminated by the soft glow of a desk lamp, that he paused mid-examination. The coin, at first glance, was ordinary. Denver mint mark. Modest wear. But as Jim tilted it slightly under the magnifying lens, his breath caught. The D mint mark was different. Almost imperceptibly so. Its placement, ever so slightly off, nagged at something buried in his mental archive. He reached for a reference guide, thumbing rapidly through die pairings, magnified photographs, positioning angles. Then it struck him. The coin bore the reverse of a 1987 nickel. That shouldn't have been possible. Jefferson's Monticello on the back, yes, but the style, the steps, the relief, it all aligned with a die not intended for 1988. A mismatched die pairing. The obverse was unquestionably 1988D, but the reverse? A holdover from the year before. The silence in the room grew heavy. Jim leaned back in his chair, the weight of the discovery pressing down. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with anticipation. Had he really stumbled onto something new? He needed confirmation. Forums, fellow collectors, mint historians, most hadn't heard of it. Some dismissed it as die fatigue or a misread. But a few, the most seasoned among them, raised their brows. They requested high-resolution scans. They ran tests. And then they, too, grew quiet. Not dismissive, reverent. Slowly, news trickled into collector circles. A 1988 D nickel with a reverse die from 1987. The designation took shape, the 1988 D reverse of 1987 Jefferson nickel. At first, it was a curiosity. It didn't fetch much more than a few dollars above face value. But the more people looked, the rarer it seemed. Most 1988 D nickels bore the expected updated reverse, a subtly modified design introduced that year. Cleaner, more defined steps at Monticello's base, sharper relief. But this one? It was a time capsule. Coin experts debated the cause. Likely, a 1987 reverse die was mistakenly left in rotation at the Denver Mint and paired with a new obverse. Human error, perhaps, an oversight during the die changeover. But it wasn't supposed to happen. And that made it special. Collectors began scouring rolls. Dealers checked inventory. The chase was on. Only a few more examples surfaced, each reinforcing the suspicion, this was not widespread. This was a ghost of a moment, a fleeting misstep in an otherwise efficient minting process. The market responded gradually at first. By the mid-2000s, specimens in uncirculated condition fetched hundreds. By 2015, a slabbed example graded MS66 drew eyes at auction. The coin's story, subtle, nearly invisible, lent it a mystique that louder errors lacked. It became a symbol of sharp-eyed diligence, of knowing what others missed, yet, even then, a puzzle remained. Why was this error unnoticed for so long? Then came a twist no one had expected. A collector in Oregon, browsing estate lots, found a strange set, two 1988 D nickels, side by side, sealed in a 1990s-era plastic flip. One was the well-known reverse type for 1988, the other, the anomaly. But behind the coins, a yellowed envelope held a faded note, possible wrong reverse? Reported to Mint, 1990. The collector submitted it to PCGS for verification. The coins were authentic. The note? A revelation. It suggested that someone had spotted the anomaly decades prior, and that the Mint had been informed. But no official statement was ever released. The error was quietly acknowledged, and perhaps deliberately ignored. Why would the Mint stay silent? Perhaps because the error wasn't dramatic enough to warrant correction. Or perhaps to avoid publicizing a lapse in protocol. Whatever the reason, it added a new layer. This wasn't just a minting mistake, it was a buried story. From that point forward, prices spiked. MS65 examples began to cross the $1,000 mark. In a hobby where dramatic visuals often won the day, this coin's allure was cerebral. Collectors prided themselves on seeing what others missed. It became a badge of scrutiny, of scholarship, but the rarity wasn't just about numbers. It was about timing. The few surviving examples existed only because the mistake was caught too late to stop them, and too early to spread widely. Even today, fewer than a dozen confirmed high-grade specimens circulate among elite collections. Ironically, its error is almost invisible to the naked eye. It requires magnification, comparison, an understanding of reverse design subtleties. Yet that very obscurity is what transformed it into a legend. For Jim Wallace, whose discovery ignited the chase, the value wasn't monetary. He never sold his coin. It sits, still, in a velvet-lined box atop his shelf, next to the faded envelope he eventually received from the mint, a non-committal acknowledgement of a possible reverse discrepancy. He sometimes wonders how many more remain, slipped between couch cushions, rattling in vending machines, hidden in coffee cans. Most people will never know. To them, it's just 5 cents, an ordinary coin with an ordinary face, but to a collector's eye, it's a quiet defiance of precision. A whisper from a machine that blinked, just once, in 1988. In 1994, the United States Mint in Philadelphia produced millions of 5-cent coins, nickels bearing the familiar profile of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his Monticello estate on the reverse. It was a year like many before it in terms of coinage. The nickel's design, unchanged since 1938, was routine to the mint's machinery, the rhythm of production steady and unremarkable. A sea of nickels rolled off presses, destined for cash registers, parking meters, and children's piggy banks. Nothing about this year's batch appeared noteworthy, at first glance. The coin was composed of its usual 75% copper and 25% nickel, measured precisely at 21.2 millimeters in diameter, and weighed exactly 5 grams. But somewhere in the daily churn of minting, amid the thunder of coining presses and the clatter of blanks, an anomaly crept through the cracks of precision. No one at the time took note of it. The presses kept thundering. Coins kept piling. The error, nestled among them, traveled incognito. Years passed. These nickels changed hands, dropped into vending machines, lost in couch cushions, and rubbed smooth in pockets and purses. Thousands of collectors inspected them without noticing. And then, somewhere in the Midwest, in the cluttered workspace of a modest coin enthusiast named Ray Donnelly, an everyday sort of man with an eye for the unusual, the secret began to unravel. Ray had acquired a roll of nickels at a local estate sale, tucked among cigar boxes and tarnished silverware. The elderly man who'd passed away had been a quiet collector, never a professional, more of a hobbyist. The roll of nickels looked like any other. Worn paper, frayed at the ends. A mix of dates, mostly from the 1990s. Ray almost dismissed them. Almost that he cracked open the roll. One by one, the coins tumbled out. He turned them under the magnifying lamp. A 1992. A 1996. Then, a 1994, nothing special. Until he flipped it over, something was wrong. The Monticello on the reverse, Jefferson's neoclassical home, looked off. The left side of the building faded into a blurred mess. Columns seemed missing, or doubled. The text, Monticello, was partially struck through, like it had been tugged into shadow. But the coin was uncirculated, nowhere. His brow furrowed. He checked again. There it was, a misalignment. A die clash, maybe. Or a double strike. No, something deeper. He brought out a loop. This wasn't post-mint damage. This was an in-strike anomaly, imprinted into the very birth of the coin. He weighed it. Standard. He measured it. Exact. But the design on the reverse had a ghostly quality, as though another image had intruded during minting. A faint, mirror-like impression of Jefferson's bust, on the wrong side. A clashed die, where the dies had struck each other without a planchet between them, then resumed production, tainting the next batch with phantom designs. Ray's heart kicked a beat. He checked the obverse. Sure enough, Jefferson's eye was softened, almost shadowed, as if haunted. He flipped it again. That unnatural blur remained. He didn't sleep that night. He cross-referenced collector catalogs, online databases, auction archives. No mention of a 1994 nickel with a die clash of this kind. A few reports of minor misalignments from earlier years, a 1983 with a weak strike, a 1989 with an off-center Monticello. But not this. Not this eerie, ghost-struck fusion. When he posted pictures to a forum, the reaction was immediate, and cautious. Some dismissed it as pareidolia. Others saw what he saw, the unmistakable shadow of Jefferson where it did not belong. A noted error coin specialist requested to examine it in person. Ray sent it, carefully packaged, his hands shaking as he sealed the envelope. The expert confirmed it, a rare clashed die error, with unusual clarity. Only a handful of similar cases had ever been recorded, and never from 1994. The die clash had occurred when the reverse and obverse dies struck each other without a planchet in place. That force imprinted the reverse die with a ghost image of Jefferson's portrait. When minting resumed, that corrupted die produced coins with distorted designs, Jefferson on both sides, one intended, one a spectral echo. Ray's coin was genuine. It was one of the first confirmed specimens of what would soon be dubbed the 1994 Phantom Jefferson. Its value? At first, uncertain. Some collectors speculated it might fetch a few $100s. Then others chimed in, comparing it to infamous mint errors like the 1955 double die cent or the 2004 Wisconsin quarter with the extra leaf. Speculation grew. Collectors scoured their change. Dealers made inquiries. Ray refused to sell, offers climbed. $500. Then $1,200. One collector offered a vintage gold coin in trade. Ray declined, every time, but then came the twist. A second coin surfaced. Found in Oregon. Then a third, this time from Texas. All bearing the same misstruck signature, Jefferson's ghost on the reverse. The die had not failed for just one coin. It had continued to strike, likely for a brief but unnoticed window. The number of known examples grew, slowly, but enough to shift the narrative. What had seemed like a one-of-a-kind treasure was now part of a microseries. Scarce, yes. But not singular. Prices dipped. Then they surged again when one appeared in a heritage auction, certified by PCGS as an exceptional die clash error. Final bid $4,650. Ray watched the auction in silence. His was still the first. The cleanest. The most dramatic in detail. Experts now believed no more than 25 existed. The die had been retired quickly once the error was noticed, quietly, internally. No official statement had been released. The U.S. Mint never acknowledged it. Collectors dubbed it the Phantom Run. A fleeting moment in 1994 when Jefferson's face haunted both sides of a coin, undetected and unrecorded, like a whisper in metal. A minting misstep turned into mystery. Ray kept his coin, encased in glass on his study shelf, next to a faded 1939 nickel his father had once carried. He never sold it, not for $5,000, not for $10,000, though the offers kept coming. To him, the coin wasn't just valuable because of its rarity. It was a whisper of human error inside the machinery of precision. A secret left to be found. A moment when even a process as mechanical as minting could produce something strange and beautiful. He often thought about how many had slipped into circulation, unnoticed. Used to pay for coffee. Left in tip jars. Traded, spent, forgotten. Every now and then, he'd buy a roll of nickels. Just to check.